Greetings all, Chieftain here with a little bit of Irish trivia. Now, it's ordinarily a bad thing if a bunch of your senior leadership of your army are captured in the middle of a war. Well, that's exactly what happened to the US Army in 1943. You ought to know the names of Jacob Devers, Gladian Barnes, and Wilson Palmer. I have mentioned them before. One of them was the head of Armoured Force, one was in charge of inventing all the Army's equipment, and one will be in charge of selecting which vehicles would be produced, and some of them went on to other things later on in the war. These days, one would not put a bunch of senior people in the same airplane, either in the army or even in the corporate world, for fear that the airplane would crash or get shot down and everybody will be lost in one fell swoop. Not so in 1943, however. They put 5 generals in the same airplane, including Devers, Barnes, and Palmer, and the airplane got lost and crashed. Fortunately, nobody was hurt, but it turned out that the crash was not in friendly territory. In short order, the crew and passengers were captured. This could have a major effect on the Army's war effort. The place they had crashed was called Athenry. It's about 15 miles east of Galway in Ireland. Ireland, of course, was not an Allied power. Joining the Allies would require joining with the UK. And since they had only 2 decades prior had a war of independence against the UK, and only 5 years previously had in effect replaced the king as the practical head of state with an Irish president, it would have been politically unacceptable, so neutrality it was. As a part of this policy of neutrality, any combatants who ended up in Ireland would be captured and interned. So if an airplane got lost, shot down, or a ship wrecked and survivors came ashore in Éire, as the country was also known, they'd be rounded up and sent to a prison camp in the Curragh, which is a little bit southwest of Dublin. If the aircraft was repairable, it was placed into Irish military service, and the Irish ended up with quite an odd collection in their Air Corps. And note the use of the word singular regarding where they get sent to. There was only one camp, and it didn't matter what side you were from. You were sent there. The 2 sides were normally separated by fencing when within the camp, but outside, it was down to the honor system and good behavior. You see, bored, angry people are troublesome, and the Irish decided to have a system which kept prisoners happy. As a result, they would be allowed to go out on day passes to the pub, the races, cinema, whatever. Getting into fights with the enemy down the pub would result in a loss of privileges for your whole side, which would not make for your popularity. So here's how it worked. If you were within the camp, it was expected that you might try to escape through the fence, past the guards, and either the UK border in the north, or maybe the German or British embassy in Dublin, or perhaps you would steal a boat and go back to occupied France. If you made it, fair dues to you, no harm, no foul. But if you were on a day pass, you had to give your word of honor that you would return that night. The paper you signed was called a parole. If you broke parole, not only would day passes be lost for all the others who stayed behind, but the Irish government might swing towards allowing the other side access to Irish ports and airfields. And given that Ireland was the gateway to the Atlantic and the U-boat war, that was no small matter. The governments instructed their forces to follow the parole system. It got to the point that one RAF flyer who came up with a plan for a legal escape by signing out, pretending to forget his gloves, signing back in, getting his gloves and then walking out the gate without signing out again, made it to the UK, and then was sent back by the British government for breaking the spirit of the rules. One Canadian crew who walked into what they thought was a Scottish pub after their crash landing was surprised to find a Luftwaffe birthday party celebration in progress, and then was even more astounded to be told that RAF party crashers were not welcome, the British party was next door. Anyway, back to the story of the generals. Ireland may have been officially neutral, but the government was under no particular delusion as to which side needed to win the war, so it was unofficially neutral in favour of the Allies, and it started helping out under the table, as it were. By the time the generals had crashed, it was decided that combatant would be very narrowly defined, as in partaking in a combat mission. Most any German who ended up in Ireland would have been on a combat mission, but most Allied personnel were just doing ferry runs that went awry. As such, they wouldn't have been combatants under the definition and thus would be delivered to the border and told to walk across. Such was to be the case for this clutch of prisoners. After a pretty reasonable lunch in a local hotel, they were bundled into a few cars and sent north to the UK, crossing the border from Sligo after a 14-hour stay in Ireland. And America's war could continue after only the 2-day delay. The incident was classified in the US with the restrictions only being lifted in the 1990s. If you want to know a bit more about all of the above, I have a couple of written articles on the World of Tanks website. Look for the links below. Well, that's it. Have a good Paddy's Day, and I will talk to you in the next video.